talking college football risers, all that and more when we return.
Welcome to the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into those college studs. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, joined as always by Andy Starr and Aaron Wilcox. That's at AStarFF on Twitter and at Aaron Wilcox 86 on Twitter. You can find me at Dynasty Coach A on Twitter as well. And tonight, like I said, we're going to be talking about those Devy risers, those college football risers, the players that are doing really well. We talked last week about some players that were falling off, that maybe having some difficulty and some issues, especially a lot of those quarterbacks that we were having issues with. There's maybe a couple quarterbacks we'll talk about tonight, but there's a lot of excitement in the air. There's a lot of we're finally getting some answers from these players, from these teams. They're starting to play real competition, and we're starting to filter through Debbie Beth and figure it all out and all that kind of stuff. So excited to talk about that tonight. Excited to talk more about some college football, some Debbie football with you guys. And first, let's check in with the boys. Aaron, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing well. Very excited for tonight's episode. And yes, we are approaching 100 episodes here as a podcast. We should do something celebratory for sure once we hit that here in a couple more. But just talking breakouts, these are really, really fun things to discuss. Just guys who have been excelling thus far. We're going to have some potential talk if it's a fake out. If it's not a true breakout, maybe some fool's gold here. But yeah, excited to get into that with you, gentlemen.
Yeah, it is. Actually, I would say the show is growing exponentially as far as episodes go, because when we first started, it was kind of just record when we can. We'll talk about football if we get the itch, like that kind of thing. We're getting close to episode 100, but it's not like we started a couple months ago or something like that. We started 5 years ago, but for the first couple of years, it was kind of like, hey, it's been 2 months. You want to record? And now we're definitely a lot more consistent. So hopefully that is better for the audience, better for everyone, and better for Andy. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to discuss. It's the beginning of the season. We're going to talk about like whether or not these guys are fool's gold or if they're, real NFL talents. And you look at the games that some of these guys have played, like Northwestern State and Elon and all these other schools. It's like you have to try and parse through that and see, is this true? Is this going to continue once they get into the conference schedule? Same thing with some of the guys that have underperformed. We're not going to really be touching on them as much tonight, but it's tricky because this is like kind of the start of the second season. Not to say that these first games didn't count, but a lot of the games that they've played so far, some of these teams anyway, you got to kind of take the results with a grain of salt. But before I throw it back to you, I do have to say, and I don't want you to use the mute button on me for the first time ever, Diego Pavia, my friend. I feel so bad for Lenore Sellers that he got knocked out of that game, because it would have made it so much sweeter. Because Vandy was winning that game no matter what. Lenore Sellers, he didn't look great. He didn't look bad either. But that was Vanderbilt's game from I would say first quarter on, all the way up to the end. And I just had to bring him up. I was going to do a guess the guy and just sort of like lay out all the things that he did better than Lenore Sellers. It was going to be an obvious answer, and that was kind of going to be the shtick. But I'm sorry that Lenore Sellers got hurt, but only because I couldn't dunk on you guys with Diego Pavia. Even though yes, he's probably 5'8", and he's wearing like high heels out there, calling him 6 feet. But you know what? I'm gonna take my Pavia wins as they come.
You know, and I do appreciate it as a mini victory lap, if you will, instead of a full one. I will say, honestly, Diego Pavia is starting to feel like my Dylan Gabriel from last year, where it was just like, I truly believe in this player. Like, I know he's a talented quarterback. And then I go to the Senior Bowl and I'm sitting there watching Dylan Gabriel at the Senior Bowl and I'm just like, this guy gets it. This guy's good at football. But he's 5'10", and so it's just like the NFL just doesn't love it. Even though obviously Gabriel, was drafted in the third round and all that kind of stuff. And I wouldn't be opposed to Pavia being drafted in the third round either. But if we start talking about more than that, then that's when I go, let's pump those brakes a little bit. But I guess we can get into our risers, and maybe Pavia will be in the risers here. We kind of broke it down into four different tiers. We have our obvious studs and stars, our high end college prospects, a tier down from the high end, and then flashing but maybe fool's gold. So we're going to try and talk through these players tonight and then figure out which tier they go into. Hopefully, we'll be able to agree on everything. If not, obviously, host wins. Host gets to make the final say when it's all said and done. Obviously, Aaron, you came up with the idea, so why don't you start us off? I mean, I don't really care if you just want to throw out a player and we can go, or if you want to start with, let's go with the stud.
Let's start with the stud here.
All
Jeremiah
right.
Smith, absolutely a obvious stud and star category. I don't even know if we call it really a breakout, right? He's already broken up. He's just continuing to excel, showcase his talent thus far. Don't think there needs to be too much of a conversation with him. Do you guys agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
I don't even know if that we need to talk more than that. 315 receiving yards so far, three tutties through three games, and with the first year starter at QB, not much more needs to said there. So yeah, obvious stud. I don't think we need to talk too much more about that one.
All right, John can go next here, or actually Andy, right, under me, at least on my screen. Maybe Andy, throw out a guy.
I'm gonna throw out a guy that I want to get your guys' opinions on because I don't even necessarily know where I'm at on him, and that's Oregon's quarterback Dante Moore. I think he's had a decent start, playing some P4 competition at least with Oklahoma State. I know they blew them out of the water, and Northwestern's not like the class of the Big Ten, but you got to consider these higher end opponents. It's not like those teams I was talking about earlier with like Northwestern State, the FCS schools, and he's looked pretty good. I mean, his ADOT isn't where I want it to be, but the yards per attempt and completion percentage and big time throw percentage is all there. So I wanted to get a feeler about how you guys are looking at him right now.
I'm still not really buying in necessarily with Dante Moore. I mean, I think he was a polished enough guy, talented enough guy coming out of high school. I just need to see more. Again, it's competition that he's going against thus far. That's what really does it for me. I mean, just really no competition, right? And we've seen some kind of funky, just games thus far. I know he's been efficient. He's been not having a bunch of turnovers. That's all great to see. But once those games start getting a little bit tougher here, they got Penn State coming up. Eventually, they have Iowa, USC. I mean, they don't have the most difficult schedule as far as like the high end teams, but they still have a increasingly difficult schedule coming up. I don't think that Dante Moore is necessarily going to walk through the competition quite as easily as he did thus far, and so he's definitely a tier down from the high end. I'm wondering if he's a little bit more of a flashing but fool's gold. I don't know what category you had him, Andy, if you said, but mute. Sorry.
Muted. I feel like it's almost like a cookie cutter flashing, but maybe fool's gold just because he has played so well. But I'm kind of leaning towards a tier down from the high end, just because I wanna like give him the benefit of the doubt so far. Just because it has been a decent start, I'd like to see him throw the ball down the field more. I think the connection with DeCorian Moore is going to develop as we move throughout the season. So I'm like right between 3 and 4, but I'll say 3, just because I don't think it's necessarily all flash. I think there is something there.
I even before Aaron gave his answer, I was definitely leaning more towards Fool's Gold. He obviously is flashing, but it's you know, I guess it's against teams that you should be flashing against, and so and even flashing isn't even is probably not even the right word because he's doing well. I would say he's doing well against a pretty poor competition. Uh, his intended air yards are not nearly as high as I would like them to be at 8.5. The big time throw rate is there, but once again, you're playing Montana State, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, and he's barely over that threshold of 5%. So not anything amazing or anything like that. And we've already seen him, obviously at a different school and everything. We've already seen him essentially fail, and now through 3 weeks, I have a hard time believing that he's just ready. He's just taking that next step and everything. He's doing everything right. We can't really say that he's done anything wrong. So I guess it's difficult because we created these 4 tiers. So I'm not saying oh he sucks blah blah blah. I'm just saying like he definitely has to take another step. And so at this point, I'm still leaning Fool's Gold.
That will put him at flashing, but maybe fool's gold. Who knows? Other names you could call that tier is like uncertain, but you could still have some optimism there, or guys that we might be starting to change our minds on, but we're not fully there yet, right? So yeah, good start for Dante Moore. We'll see what's ahead. They'll probably have a pretty productive season overall as a team, right? They should be successful, win a lot of games, but he needs to really wow with the skills and what he's putting on there, putting out there on a production standpoint and just from a film basis. Make some really tough throws, have some anticipation, develop that part of his game. I'm curious who John has here for next player.
All right, since we're talking about QBs here, why don't we stick with it? And I'm going to go with a QB that was off of a lot of radars going into the season, Bo Pribula. Is he a obvious stud, high end college prospect, tear down, or a flash in the pan, if you will? Because we've seen, I mean, not the greatest uh, defenses that he's played against. Kansas is okay, whatever. Obviously, Louisiana, not much, and then Central Arkansas, definitely not. But he has definitely flashed at the very least, and we're seeing a lot of good things from Missouri right now. So I'm wondering how you guys are feeling about it going in to week 4 here with Bo Pribula or however the hell you say his name.
Yeah, initially I was feeling really good about him, but that's why we wait because he looked really good against Central Arkansas, and then he looked pretty good against Kansas, and then last week against UL Lafayette he just kind of looked average. So we gotta kind of see where we go from here. Um, the yards per everything's gotten worse as the season's progressed, as far as like yards per attempt, big time throw, all that stuff. So yeah, he has the rushing upside. He's got weapons. I feel like Marquise Johnson was utilized a lot in the first week, and then he kind of dissipated, and now he's kind of relied heavily on Kevin Coleman, which is why I think was why we're seeing this more the shorter passes underneath because Kevin Coleman's obviously a pretty, I wouldn't say prolific slot receiver, but I think he's one of the better slot receivers in the country right now. And maybe that's just how Drinkwitz wants to run the offense right now. But they are obviously going to be playing an SEC schedule, which I don't think anyone is going to go in saying like, "Oh, that's a walk in the park," because it's clearly not. So where he's at right now, I don't think he's going to move up from there based on the competition that he's about to play. So for me, he's kind of like a flash in a pan, and that flash was week 1, and now we're kind of seeing the real Bo Pribula moving forward.
Yeah, I tend to agree there, though I really do like Bo Prabula. I mean, he was a sleeper that I was trying to draft here late in C2C drafts, for example, this season, and glad I got some shares of him because I think he will be productive. But as far as me saying that he's like a tier down from that high end, that's pretty lofty still. So when I have to choose, it's a tough tier, right? Kind of wish that there was that in between there because that's where I'd have him. But I would say he's a little bit more of that flashing but fool's gold at this time, or a guy that I'm uncertain on, but have some optimism for him.
I tend to agree with you, but I'm going to go ahead and just say a tier down from the high end. I honestly think he has flashed at times. No, he's definitely not perfect or anything like that by any means. But I would definitely like to see him push the ball down the field more, like Andy was saying. But I think he has the ability to possibly take that step forward. Whereas there's a lot of these QBs that even the ones that we like, where it's just they would have to take such a huge leap forward that I really feel like they're all the fool's gold. And there's really only a handful of guys that really have that chance. And give me the SEC guy who has flashed already and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go with 3, but he's not far from. He's like 3.9. He's almost at 4 for tier 4.
There you go. There you go. So technically, he does end up in that kind of tier 4, but definitely some intrigue there. And I like his upside. I think that the mobility is huge, right, for him as a prospect. And if he can just continue to develop that passing, which too many people kind of wrote him off for that, like, oh, he's not going to be a good passer. We just didn't really see him develop. He didn't get a lot of opportunity to pass at Penn State. So he's finally getting an opportunity here, though. We have to remember he almost didn't win that job. Like he was what, co-starter week 1 for Missouri. Not that that makes a huge difference, but at the same time, it makes it seem like he wasn't separating that much within that room, which is surprising. But we know how coaches are, so I digress. I will go with maybe a different position here. We went with a couple quarterbacks. Jeremiah Smith, obvious guy. I will go with a freshman, and that's Jaron Kiwe Sega Polatele. Cal quarterback who I may or may not have just butchered his name, but he has been impressing. He's been showing off some really great touch, great zip on the ball. He's been kind of a fearless passer. He started off really hot, maybe cooling down a little bit, but again, I think just to see those types of things from a freshman, it's very special. I'm going to have him as a high-end college prospect at this rate. That can change, right? I'm just going to say that I've seen some very high-end things from him, and I know it's lofty, but in this quarterback landscape and just seeing a true freshman stand out, win the job like he did right away, that's been impressive for Kiwe Sega Polatele.
Does he have a brother? Uh, I, I was trying to look up his name and I just realized that I found John Kiawe Sagapule or whatever. So either I have a mistake here in Debbie Beth, or there's a brother at some point.
There's probably a brother. I feel like all those Samoan Hawaiian guys have like 5 family members in playing college football at a time.
That's true. No, I mean I definitely have Jaron here as well. So I don't know. I have a feeling that he might have a brother or something like that. Oh man, I gotta go. Oh, I don't know. I feel like I got to go against you here. I'm gonna go a tier down from high end. I'm not gonna like completely crush them or anything like that. Obviously, week 1, everyone lost their minds, but we did. I think we did a good job of saying pump the brakes, pump the brakes. Let's give it a couple weeks. Made some comps to DJU, not necessarily as a player, but just like look at what can happen, like that kind of thing. Even look at what has happened with Arch. There's no guarantees of anything. We really, I mean, honestly, I don't even know if you can guarantee anything. There's a reason why the NFL and more and more even fantasy players and things are starting to look for 20, 30 games from QBs before they really feel comfortable with them. And that's that there's a reason for that because even 18, 19 games into their college career, they might not have all the answers and everything. So definitely not saying that he can't take a bigger step forward. And he's obviously a true freshman. He needs to take a step forward from what he's doing right now. But he's just being really safe with the ball, which is great. but it's not what I want to call a high end college prospect. Is someone who's being a game manager and being safe with the ball. Not to say that anyone can do that because that's not fair at all. But it's definitely not what I'm looking for my high end fantasy quarterbacks. You can talk about high end college guys, and maybe that's where you're going, Aaron. But like I guess I'm still thinking of can they make it to the NFL at that point? And at this point, I'd say a tier down from the high end, but he definitely has the capability of getting higher.
I'll just start it out by saying like w- all this hype for JKS, and I still haven't figured out how to say his name, very fluently, so I'm not going to try it. But and I will get it eventually. It's just I haven't put the time in. But why are we not feeling the same way about a guy like Malik Washington at Maryland, who is having a very similar start to his season as a freshman quarterback? You see all the hype for JKS because he had such a like dynamic first game, but nothing for Malik Washington, who in my eyes is having basically the exact same start to the season for Maryland. So that's where you have to you look at it, you back up and look at it through a wider lens and say like, okay, well, this is obviously being, you know, they're overrated based on that week one performance, because otherwise we feel the same way about Malik Washington. So that's why I kind of agree with John that we need to put him in a tier down from the high end. It's starting out good. Like true freshmen never do well in the P4 conferences. They hardly ever start. This year we're blessed with like 3 or 4 true freshman starters, which I feel like has never happened since I've been paying this close of attention to college football. So I'm gonna put him in the tier three that we have here, tier down from the high end. But I will also agree with John that yes, there's the stuff is there that he could move up to one, maybe by the end of the season. So, but as of right now, I'm gonna play it conservatively. I'm gonna view him in the same lens that I view Malik Washington, who's also having a great start to the season. I think both those guys could be good, but that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, bringing up Malik Washington, who, like you said, some similar production there, but he's not making the same types of throws at JKS. Because I have to maybe disagree a little bit on like him being safe. Like I think he's been safe enough with the ball, but he's been slinging it around. Like you look at some of his passes, the amount of touch, the amount of zip, and the difficulty of pass just off the chart versus Malik Washington. I haven't thoroughly watched, right, and appreciated his game to this point, but I know he's not getting the buzz because he's just not making these high degree of difficulty throws. And we're also talking about Cal here. Like this team was projected to be just trash. Everybody transferred out. Terrible, terrible situation to be in. And he's elevating that entire team. You have to have a lot of respect for what he's doing in that situation. So taking that into account, that's why I am pretty excited. But he ends up settling in that tier down from the high end. Andy's up next.
Yeah, I'll just add on. John and I are not film grinders, so we can only go with what PFF tells us. And PFF says Malik Washington has a better big time throw rate than JKS.
The funny thing is, I was just gonna say, obviously everything's not set in stone yet or anything like that. We're getting better with Devy Beth after 3 weeks, but there's still some wonky, teams that haven't played anyone and everything. But Malik Washington is ahead of JKS as of right now and Devy Beth. So I think Andy is at least mentioning the right things. Not to say that it's set in stone, or anything like that. Obviously, not saying that. I will give JKS a little credit. Going up against Minnesota, generally a good defense and everything, putting up 63% completion rate, no interceptions, all that kind of stuff. That's what we like to see. It's really the big time throw rate's not there right now. The intended air yards aren't right there, and so that's what's making me think he's being more of a game manager, which is fine as a true freshman. But I'm not quite ready to. We've seen so many of these QBs fail after even after flashing and all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously DJU is the easiest one, but I think that he's definitely in the mix, and it won't be long before, or it won't take much for him to take that next step and get into the high end college prospects. So once again, if we get into like the mini tiers and stuff, he's closer to that two than he is than he is to four. But I'm still putting him there in that three.
All right. So for my next guy, I feel like we need to just mention this player because he's having such a great start to the season, and we gotta talk about high end guys too. We can't just talk about fringe people. So where are we at with Mario Craver, who currently leads all of college football in receiving with 443 yards? Yards per route runs off the charts at 6.24. So that's like Trey Harris territory, and then some. And I mean, it doesn't look like he's slowing down. He just keeps getting better every week. So I, I'll just say where I have him right now. Um, I'm gonna put him in obvious studs and stars. I think he's gotten there right now. I think he's probably a top three receiver for 2027 as it stands right now. And that's including obviously all the guys we got. Well, it's tough with Cam Coleman. I feel like Cam Coleman and Bryant West. See, I don't want to say top three because there's so many good guys. Let's say top five. There's a lot of good guys in 2027, but I'm going to put Craver up there, challenging Cam Coleman for top five as it stands right now.
I like it a lot. I don't know if you mentioned it. I don't think you did. Mario Craver has a 46% receiving yards market share right now in that offense. He is the offense. It's just it's just unbelievable. Marcel Reed is not a good quarterback. But it doesn't matter, like, it just doesn't matter. We're getting the ball to Mario Craver. The A dot is there, that showing big playability. The yards per reception is there, showing big playability. The yards per team pass attempts lower, but once again, that's something that we see with poor QB play. You see the yards per team pass attempt come down. You see the yards per route run come down. So that's why I don't always love using those as much. I use those metrics, but that tends to follow the QB more so than even the wide receiver. And that's why you'll always hear me talking about yards per reception, A dot, things like that, because that tends to follow the player, the receiver, and not doesn't really matter about the quarterback as much. Um, Market share, obviously, that matters for the player, that matters for the wide receiver. If they're earning those targets, if they're earning those yards and everything, which he obviously is. I'm with Andy. I think he has moved into easily obvious studs and stars. I don't even know that we need to. I don't need to see anything more. Like, he could not say that he couldn't play the rest of the year or anything like that, but like, I mean, even if he kind of levels off, I still think he's going to be a top five guy in the class. Like Andy's already talking about possibly top two, at least top three, that kind of thing. But I think even if he kind of levels off and calms down a little bit, we're still talking top five wide receiver. And at that point, tell me an obvious stud and star.
Ooh, I love all of the Mario Craver breakout talk and just his ascension really as a player. And I mean, Casey Concepcion, he's having a good season for them, but Mario Craver's even blowing him out of the water, right? It's just, he's been fantastic, explosive, and he was explosive last year as a true freshman for Mississippi State. But good move for him, saying, you know what, I'm just going to I'm going to transfer out and I'm still going to break out, learning a new offense, all of that kind of thing. So Mario Craver, I'm really torn on this one. It's not because anything that you guys said was incorrect. It's just like how easily do we anoint a guy as a star in the Devy landscape or for a college prospect standpoint. But last week he made a play there that just reminded me so much of a Ryan Williams. Like he was just, I mean, he was catching the ball, he's running down the field, basically caught the ball, spinned out of a tackle, and just continued to outrun everybody on the field. I mean, it was like I was watching Ryan Williams, who is just a absolute star in college football, and he's been doing this, like you said, within situation. It's not like he has the best quarterback play in the country. So, yes, maybe you can point to like the competition a little bit, but it hasn't been bad. I mean, Notre Dame, right? He tore them up, and that's a good defense. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, Mario Craver, you guys convinced me. Let's say let's call him an obvious stud here.
Let's
Though
go.
I was on the fence. Yes.
And Andy was talking about how he's nervous. He doesn't want to, and I get it. Like Craver was not even on a lot of people's radars. He wasn't in most people's top 20, much less top 10, much less top 5. And now it's so difficult. And once again, nothing's locked in yet. But as of right now, Mario Craver is wide receiver 2 overall in Devy Beth. So he has moved ahead of Ryan Williams. Not far ahead. They're in the same tier and all that kind of stuff. So it's not insane or anything. Obviously, we've seen a little step back from Ryan Williams at the beginning of the season. He could easily take back over, and I don't even think it truly matters when it's all said and done. We sit here and nitpick about who's 2, who's 3, and all that kind of stuff. But really, it's who's in that tier, and that's why we're saying he's in tier 1, obvious stud and star. We can nitpick for the rest of the college season after that.
All right, John, I think you're up.
All right, so Andy took my player. I was 100% bringing up Mario Craver. I was looking at him. I don't even remember why, but at some point I labeled him in like bright green, and I'm just staring at this bright green color on around his name, and I'm like, oh, there's 100%. I'm bringing up Mario Craver, but I am going to bring up another riser, and it is a player who was actually fairly high in Debbie Beth going into the season, but he was not considered a much of a player by Debbie for Debbie purposes by just about anyone. He was a year 1-0 if I do remember correctly, or if he wasn't, he had barely broke it. I will double check while I'm sitting here, but I think he was a year 1-0. Deuce Robinson out of Florida State has to be a riser, but now it's our job to sit here and figure out how far has he risen. Is he all the way up to tier 1, or is he more of a flash in the pan?
I can start with this one. I really like what he's done, but I mean it's 2 games, right? He was pretty invisible against Alabama, and then he blew up against a team that he should have blown up against. So it's very impressive what they've done in this offense. Castellanos has been looking like an electric quarterback for FSU, but I am thinking that at the end of the day, he's going to be crashing back down a little bit. Or when I say a little bit, maybe a lot, because he was so good last game, right? So he's going to be a flash in the pan, fool's gold, some uncertainty, let's pump the brakes kind of thing for me. So I do like him. I mean, Deuce Robinson, he was on the list of guys that I wanted to mention here tonight to get your guys' opinion. He still has a long way to go from a technical standpoint at the wide receiver position, but he's showing some fun things where it's like, could he be the next type of a Drake London type of guy who just has that run after the catch ability, who has that big frame, that fluidity as a receiver? But I need to see some route running. I need to see more out of Deuce Robinson.
And he was not a year 1-0, just so we're clear. He actually had 351 receiving yards as a true freshman, 2 touchdowns, and I'm pretty sure like the threshold for year 1-0 was just 100 yards receiving. So he definitely broke that easily. So not a year 1-0, but Andy, flash in the pan or an obvious stud or somewhere in between.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way as Aaron. You're not going to get 170 receiving yards every week at 35 yards of reception against Texas. I don't even know what this abbreviation is. Texas A&M CO. I don't know what that is. It's they played some sort of team last week. I don't know if it was
East
FCS.
Texas A&M.
Okay. Yes, great. It was a great game. But I think the fact that he did have such a promising freshman season with 300 yards, over 3 yards per route run, and then took kind of like a I'll say a massive step backwards. I know his yardage went up in year 2, but he was participating in more routes and not getting nearly the amount of targets per route, and the production did drop a little bit. Granted, not all that much. Like his yards per route run was still around 2, which is where I want it. So I don't, I'm on the fence here because it was a good game. I'm definitely not putting him in high end, obviously, but I do want to kind of see more. I think because it's only been 2 games that Florida State's played, um, and I didn't hate the freshman season, so I'm kind of talking myself into a tier down from high end right now, and just I want to see what he does through a full ACC schedule, and I'll go from there. So I'll put him at 3.
All right, I am also going tier three, a tier down from high end. I mean, he's extremely high in Devi Beth right now, but once again, he's only played the 2 games, and the one game was against an FCS team that they beat 77-3. So I don't want to take too much away from it. That being said, I do think he's easily the wide receiver one on Florida State. And I believe even though he only had like 2 receptions for 12 yards or something like that against Alabama in week 1, I want to say he had a big play get called back on a penalty or something to that effect. Because I believe I was watching that game and he had some big play called back then. So it's not like it was just the one game or the one big play or something like that. And honestly, like I would say he's kind of been that through his career, like bigger plays, but so we kind of expect that anyway. Obviously, we need to see a lot more, but we like what we're seeing out of Tommy Castellanos. And once again, Deuce's he has more than double the receptions of any other player on the team. He has more than double the receiving yards of any other player on the team. He's the only person on the team with multiple touchdowns. Only receiver on the team with multiple touchdowns. So there's obviously going to be some weird stuff going on when you're talking about against an FCS team, but there's still things that we can look at and say like he's still the guy on this team. So I'm going to go a tier down from the high end and let him earn it from there.
Okay, that solidifies it for Deuce Robinson. Pretty good praise for him, and yes, a guy who's coming out of high school like as a tight end. I mean, it's exciting for him to be able to flourish here at the wide receiver position as a transfer. So I don't mind that at all. Now I got to come up with the next guy, and I'm going to actually pull CJ Bailey here, quarterback, NC State. And so this is a guy that I'm just really high on the things that I've been seeing for him thus far. CJ Bailey, he's another guy who's translated some traits or at least flashed some really, really nice talent and ball placement. I mean, he's just been phenomenal, to be honest, to start the season. It's just like, do we believe in that translating to high end Devy and NFL upside is the question. I think he's got the frame. He's bulking up, right? He's filling out that very promising frame. He has enough rushing ability where I think he can be a nice threat there, and yeah, he's not dealing with like the best weapons out there, and he's still making the most of it. So, I am pretty excited for him. I will say he's a tier down from the high end, but I was tempted to put him in with the high end prospects for sure.
I think you got him in the right spot, and it's like a lot of the quarterbacks right now. A lot of them started out hot. Some of them have continued to be hot, like the John Mateers of the world. A lot of them have, kind of fizzled out. Especially, I won't say fizzled out, but Bailey definitely cooled off against Wake last week, despite throwing 3 touchdowns in that game, which is obviously what you want to see. But I think, at least for where I stand at, the big time throw rate is sitting right there, close to where I want it. The yards per attempt and ADOT are pretty close. The completion percentage is great. And then the rushing ability is obviously a huge plus. It's just a matter of doing it for a full season and progressing a little bit. I think as the season goes on, making some throws further down the field, and like you said, his supporting cast isn't nearly as good as what some of these other guys are throwing to. I think he's got one of the better running backs in the country with Hollywood Smothers, but aside from that, who he's throwing to is not names that we're all very familiar with. So I think 3 is the right spot for him right now, but he could certainly move up to 2 after with like one like really good performance in the next week or two. So I'll put him at 3 for now, with a tier down from the high end. But I think the arrow's pointing up for him more than it is pointing down.
All right, we're in lockstep finally on this one. I think tier down from the high end, tier three here is perfect. I'm actually pretty mad at myself. He was really high in Debbie Beth going into the season during the off season. Just saw some nice things from last year as a true freshman, right? So I believe just saw some things that kind of made him stand out, but I kind of blew it off as it's North Carolina State. Who cares? Blah blah blah. And I really didn't go all in on him. I'm kind of wishing I did because he was available in a lot of supplementals and things like that, and I'm wishing that I'd taken more advantage of that. That being said, I'm not ready to like completely anoint him either. He definitely needs to clean some stuff up. He shows a little bit of athleticism. He shows he shows the big time throws that we like to see. I wish he would push the ball down the field a little bit more, but you might be able to look at his receiving core and say there's a reason for it and things like that. So I really like the tier down from the high end. Give him the rest of the season. Maybe he can even move into a high end college prospect. By the end of the year. But let's make him work for it while we still can.
Yeah, and that's fair. I'm just loving the way that he navigates the pocket though as a passer. So there's definitely some promising things there. I actually think that his most recent game um, was probably the best that we've seen out of him. I mean, he's actually continuing to trend up. I know he had a pretty hot start, but I mean, that last game against Wake Forest, that was impressive. 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, again, some rushing contributions, and the way that he was accurate throughout that game. So, yeah, I think he has a high upside to him. He just needs to do a bit more, like you guys said.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm still kicking myself about that one, but I did end up taking a lot of his teammate Hollywood Smothers in the offseason. And so I guess with running backs, I'm willing to forgive a little bit more, and it was probably more for, even though there was obviously like Devy hints. There it was probably more for college or CFF purposes, things like that. But I'm really liking what I've seen so far with Hollywood Smothers here, going into year three. 380 yards rushing, 3 tutties, 10 receptions already. I mean, only 42 receiving yards, not the greatest, but at least he's being targeted. Which we can't say for a lot of. I saw someone. I wish I could remember who it was, but I saw someone tweeting today like, "Man, this running back class is not going to be fantastic, is it?" Or something to that effect. And there's a lot of running backs that are underwhelming right now, not showing any kind of receiving ability whatsoever, anything like that. So where are we putting Hollywood Smothers in our Debbie Risers tier here?
I think for me, well, yeah, I'll just say it real quick. I like what I've seen from Hollywood Smothers so far. I believe he's like, if you just look at the P4 running backs, he's top 5 in rushing yards right now. And as a receiver, I think I would prefer him to just about anyone above him. You've got Justice Haynes and Ahmad Hardy essentially that are above him right now. And I feel like Smothers has shown that he has a better receiving profile, at least this season, than either of those guys. Probably in all seasons, because I don't think Justice Haynes has ever
Last
electrified
year,
me.
well, last year Hollywood had 19 receptions for 263 yards. This year he already has 10 receptions, but he only has
Yeah.
42 yards. So I mean, I'm assuming they're being close to the line of scrimmage and things like that. But I think he already proved enough last year where we can say he's at least okay as a receiver.
Right. I think he falls pretty squarely for me in the high end college prospects as it stands right now. Just, and one of the other things is like, I don't know that there is an obvious stud star running back right now, and maybe that's why. So I'm putting him at 2 just because I'm not really you know feeling very bullish like that on any of these running backs in any draft class moving forward. I'm sure some will stand out, but the guys that we were hoping to I wouldn't even say like hoping to see more from. Like Jeremiah Love, he's looked pretty good. I guess you could throw him into the obvious studs and stars. But like Nick Singleton's kind of had a slow start. I feel like he's, maybe hasn't really separated himself from Katron Allen. So there's not a lot of guys I'd put in tier one right now. So Hollywood Smothers, I think, fits kind of nicely there in tier two. I do think he deserves to be mentioned as one of the top running backs in this class as it stands right now. I just don't know how much that really means as far as NFL.
I am going to disagree with you. I think there is at least one player that we can put into tier one, at least one running back we can put into tier one. But I'm going to let Aaron talk about Hollywood before we move on to that player.
Yeah, for me, it's not ever really been that Hollywood Smothers isn't a kind of a fun player, a quick, exciting, receiving option. And in college, he can have a little bit of heavier workload. In the NFL, he's going to be a little bit more in that. I'm trying to think of like the role because to call him like a Bucky Irving type of player, I mean, that's really lofty, right? Those guys are pretty rare out there. So I am a little bit hesitant. Do you remember like Michael Carter coming out of North Carolina? That is more so what I'm thinking. So, a guy who can be a
Hollywood
pretty
has
good
more
player.
burst than that, doesn't he?
I think he's a really quick and bursty player. I don't know if his high end speed, excuse me, is
Hmm.
quite where I want it to be. And
Okay.
combination of that and some limitations with his frame and size. I see him as a guy who's going to be stuck in that like 190s range, right? But in today's NFL, you can get by with that, right? You can be still a productive player. So I am still a little bit hesitant on him. He's a tier down from the high end type of guys for me. No disrespect to what he's doing this season, right? I mean, this season, I think we're seeing some struggles at the running back position, but that doesn't mean that he's a stud. It makes him kind of high in the ranks, right? If other guys are falling or just not impressing that much. But there are years where we just say, hey, it's a down year. Like, there's just not that many good running backs in general. And I'm not going to, pump him up excessively and say he's a star or anything like that. That's for sure. So I think he's still a tier down from the high end. If he continues to flash, maybe either and or bulks up and shows that long speed consistently. I mean, I think that we do have a pretty awesome player on our hands, albeit a little bit undersized, with a guy like him.
I've seen too many guys now that I've been doing this for a handful of years. I've just seen too many guys that are at that 195 range, and then when the actual combine comes around, they're 201, 206, something like that. Sometimes somehow, some way, they're like 215, and you're like, how did this even happen? So once they hit that like 195, I'm really not overly concerned anymore, especially in this day and age. We've seen so many. You just mentioned Bucky. Obviously, you got Gibbs. You have James Cook. You have there's others obviously that I'm forgetting right now.
Chain, Devin
Yeah,
Chain.
Achan. Like there's so many of these guys that are high end running backs right now that were 195 pounds when we were talking about them in their. And he's a true junior too. So I mean, obviously we can't guarantee he's coming out. We're assuming he's coming out. We now in this day and age, there's no guarantees of any of that. Like he could easily stay another year, get some NIL, bulk up a little bit, eat a couple cheeseburgers, and next thing you know, he's 202. So I get the concerns. Did you say what'd you say tier three?
Yeah, yeah, very solidly in
Okay.
tier three. Room to grow. I'm a little bit actually skeptical of that 195
Oh,
weight that's been listed. That's, I guess, maybe more my issue, right? Do I trust that? I don't even think it's listed on the team site, but we just been kind of assuming that. So I might need to do a little bit deeper dive into it. Anyways, you guys are definitely making some great points, and I agree. Nowadays, you don't have to be 205, 210, 220, right? You kind of want to at least be close to that 200-ish mark. So, anyways, Hollywood, he's been playing really well, and maybe he's not full gold. That's for sure. There's something there, I would think, with him.
well, yeah, I appreciate that. I don't. I think we're beyond that at this point. I get what you're saying. I am going to call him a high end college prospect. I'm going to call him tier two. So I guess we're leaving him in tier two here, but I get where you're coming from at the same time. Like he's not locked into anything by any means, but I definitely think he has to be a riser. And I feel like a lot of people were just considering him a CFF only kind of player going into the season. And I feel like already we have to kind of be questioning that. And so that's why I want to go ahead and move him into that tier two, because we at least have to be like talking about it. And I'd rather be ahead of the game on Hollywood. I love the player. I've enjoyed having him on my Devy and C2C rosters. That's been a lot of fun. But I know I'm kind of breaking out of turn here, but we already talked about. Andy was saying how there was no other running backs that are in that tier one. He went into the chat and said Tory Blaylock propaganda incoming. The hilarious part is, while I should be talking about Tory Blaylock here, I'm going to talk about a senior running back who is moving into tier one for me. And the only thing that makes me not want to put him into tier one, so I'm kind of in between here. I'm not going to lock him in 100%, but I'm saying I believe he's getting there, is just because I've seen other running backs from Washington not exactly do exactly what we thought they were going to do, going into the NFL. And so it does concern me a little bit with Jonah Coleman, but I'll tell you what, I think that he can be that one player right now that we could say is tier one with everything that he's done so far in previous years, but even more importantly, what he's done so far this year.
Yeah, I would. I don't know if I'd agree, but I'm with you. Like, I kind of stand by my last statement that there aren't too many players that I'd put in that obvious studs and stars. Another guy that we probably should talk about after this is Ahmad Hardy, but who I feel like I'm closer to putting him in tier one than a guy like Jonah Coleman. But I do like Jonah Coleman. Like his receiving upside's great. He's been good for a long time. But he's a senior. You know, I guess that's all I can. The big time run rate wasn't necessarily there last season, so I'm wondering if that levels out as he gets into the Big Ten schedule again. So I'm gonna wait and see on that for a little bit, just because let's see who they've played so far: Colorado State and UC Davis. So not necessarily top end competition. So that's why I'm gonna leave him in the high end college prospects.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. I also have him as a high-end prospect. As far as an obvious stud and star in this class, it's shaping up like he's trending towards that stud status. But is he there yet? And that's what this podcast is all about here. Do we fully get him there just based off of 2 games of production thus far when Adam Muhammad, his younger I guess, competitor in that running back room has also looked really good. Not as good, right? Not, quite as explosive and as much of a beast as the senior that I mean, I guess Jonah Coleman is, right? Jonah Coleman is just a beast, right? At this point, he's developed his body. And I think that's the biggest thing with Coleman is that he has continued to improve his game year after year after year. Like he used to be a little bit more of that bruising grinder back, not a lot of like run after the catch, versatility, smoothness to his game at least, or at least that contact balance and ability to stay on his feet that you want to see out of these high-end backs that make so many of these NFL guys. That's what we just saw with Bijan Robinson just tearing up the Minnesota Vikings. Just yards after contact, spinning off of defenders, getting some extra broken tackles into there. And we're seeing that out of Jonah Coleman now. That's very impressive that he has taken his game to that next level. So he is so close to that obvious stud star category. For right now, I have to put him in the high end, but it actually feels wrong because if we have Hollywood Smothers in the high end college prospects level, then I mean, there's no world, at least that I'm comfortable living in, where Jonah Coleman is at the same tier right now. I think that there's a break, so maybe I do have to move him up now. Let's put him in the obvious studs category for Jonah Coleman at Washington. Yeah. You guys
Take
did
that,
it.
Andy.
You guys did it to me.
Take that.
I don't even. It's not
Jonah
like I don't
Coleman
like the guy.
hater. I'm so disappointed in you right now.
Jeez.
All right, so now I'm gonna do about 20 minutes on Tory Blaylock, and then we'll get out of here. No, I skipped a couple turns here. We only have a few
Yeah,
more
you
minutes
skipped
left,
me
but
twice,
yeah.
and then you
All
went
right, so
twice.
and Andy hates Jonah Coleman, so we're gonna skip him again. Aaron, who you got for us?
Oh,
Sh- How about I pick a guy for Andy, a guy that I think Andy will like, and this might be a very straightforward one here. But we're talking about so many running backs here. We have to talk about Justice Haynes, Michigan running back, of course. No, but Haynes has been showing out this season, right? Very solid and turned out to be that lead back at Michigan. I think that the breakout's real, right? The talent's always been there. A guy that I'm on record saying like just kind of trust that athleticism, excuse me, coming out of high school, and then the flashes that we saw at Alabama. We know Alabama's struggles just running the ball over the last year or two, and Haynes is showing that nope, I can do it in any system. I can do it better in that Michigan system. Just very explosive thus far this season. In 3 games, he's averaged 129 rush yards per game, 5 touchdowns already, almost surpassing what he had entirety of last season. And I mean, he's not like a prolific receiving back this year yet. That's for sure, right? He needs to show up there. So I think he's a very high end player, if not becoming more of a stud as far as a rusher of the ball. We need to see more out of that receiving game, but he's flashed a little bit there in the past at Alabama. So he's really up there for me. Maybe I'll have to hold off. I'll be the tiebreaker, the decision maker here between Andy and John. What do you guys think with obvious, big time riser in Justice Haynes?
for me, okay. I will say that before the season started, I was like, maybe I was a little too hard on Justice Haynes based on his breakaway yards per attempt, which is different than his big time run rate, which has never been good, because he can bust those big plays, and just let's look at the 3 games. Like he had New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Central Michigan, over 100 yards in all of them. New Mexico, obviously, he thrashed for like 10 yards a carry, 2 big time runs, caught 2 balls. Uh, but then Oklahoma, he was just kind of pounding the rock. He had one carry for over 1 big time run. It happened to be a 75-yard run, which we knew he was capable of. But beyond that, he had 18 carries for 50 yards. So again, it comes back to that the big plays are there, but he's not doing it at a frequency that I really like. And then Central Michigan again, pretty good showing there against an inferior opponent. So I'm looking at the Oklahoma game and saying, okay, that is the Justice Haynes that I'm familiar with, the guy who can rip off like an 80-yard carry and then disappear for an entire game. He also had like 3 catches for -5 yards in that game. So I think it's a promising start. He's obviously going to get a huge workload at Michigan, which is, I think, why he probably transferred there, because he wasn't getting that at Alabama. But he's certainly not going to end up in tier 1 for me. So I'll put him in tier 2, because I'll say that it's a good start, but it really hasn't changed my opinion on him too much. I just feel like he's getting the ball more. He doesn't have that Jamarian or Jam Miller taking carries from him in this Michigan offense.
All right, so it comes down to me, and I will say with Justice Haynes in week 1, he was like, I think he might have been a top of the running back Devy Beth. He had an amazing game, and he was already fairly high, because once again there's not that many proven running backs in Devy right now, so he was already fairly high in Devy Beth. He skyrocketed. Every week he has dropped, and it's like Andy was saying. We don't see the big time run rate for what we would expect. Like, he obviously has the ability to break a big run, a couple big runs, but he's not doing it on a consistent basis as far as like that high end that we would like to see. 8% is just barely at that threshold that I want to see, but I'd really like to see much higher than that, especially considering that 2 of the teams were lower level of competition. I'd actually like to see closer to 12 like we're seeing from Hollywood Smothers right now and things like that. We're saying there's some lower level competition, but we're seeing those big plays and everything. And there's no receiving game. He's never had a receiving game at all. For whether it was at Alabama or here, and so I cannot put him into my tier one. Right now, he is directly ahead of Hollywood Smothers and Debbie Beth, but they are essentially in the same tier and Debbie Beth, or at least pretty damn close. So I think, what did we put Smothers in? Was it tier two or tier three?
We had him in
Tier
two.
two. Yeah, so I feel like I'm pretty good with putting him into tier two, a high end college prospect, but I don't know if I can move him into that studs until we start seeing some receptions or he just starts breaking more plays.
Yeah, that's very fair. He needs to be breaking those big plays more often. He is. I wonder at the next level, is he a little bit more of a grinder overall as a player? I still think that the talent's there ultimately with athleticism. And this is, we have to keep in mind, an offense that struggled mightily last year. And now they're running out a true freshman quarterback who start trying to figure things out as a first year starter and just very early into his collegiate career. So Bryce Underwood, I think, will figure things out, but he is more likely to tuck the ball down and kind of run it, or he has not been great utilizing Haynes thus far. So I'm excited to see what's ahead. I think that we are all in agreement here that he is more of a high end college prospect at this rate than a true star.
I believe so. Andy, we skipped you 13 times. Do you have a last player for us before we get out of here?
Well, I was going to mention a guy that I was truly wrong on, and that is Missouri running back Ahmad Hardy. I didn't even dog on him as much as Mekhi Hughes last offseason because he wasn't
Thank
getting
God.
nearly as much Devy love as Mekhi Hughes was. But I kind of felt the same way about him as I did Mekhi Hughes. You just didn't hear about it as much because it wasn't a big enough name. But I was dead wrong. I think what he's done at Missouri in these first three games we can't discount it at all. I think they've played decent enough competitions. UL Lafayette's not great or anything, but they're when you're running for 200 yards in a game, I don't think it really matters what Division One program you're playing. Like that's not easy to do, and the big time run rate's crazy. If I remember correctly, he's still not quite catching balls, which is maybe the issue there. But I would have had him below tier four before this season started, and now I think he's comfortably in tier two. So, and the arrow's pointing up for him as well. He's a type of guy that I think with a good SEC season, we're talking about him as like the RB1 potentially next year.
Yeah, I'll say he's the only other running back right now in Debbie Beth that's even like sniffing tier one. So I will also put him in tier two. I will call him a high end college prospect right now, but he it might be one or two more weeks before he's in tier one for me.
I think it'll be 1 or 2 more weeks until we're saying he's a bit of fool's gold here, guys. Ahmad Hardy crashed
Go
back down
on.
efficiency. Ahmad Hardy, and I am the Ahmad Hardy truther on this podcast. I was the one guy who rostered him in C2C leagues
Do you know
from
what that
this
word
last
means?
season. Yeah, no, I'm probably not a truther, right? But I was the highest of the crew here on him, and now I am the lowest, apparently. How quickly things change in this landscape. In 3 weeks into the season, he was very pedestrian against Kansas. Kind of a plotter, to be honest, in that game. 4.5 yards per carry, one reception for 2 yards, and that's what he has on the season. And those other two games, UL Lafayette and Central Arkansas, in just routes. I can appreciate all the things that you guys said about him racking up production at a pretty impressive level in those two other games. I got to give a guy credit whenever he's getting 200 plus rushing yards in a game, right? So I think that he is actually a tier down from the high end, but he's still a very good running back. I just don't quite see the leap up into elite category. We will see him kind of crash back down, I think. And he was an efficient freshman at UL Monroe last season, but he was not prolific. There were reasons why we were a little bit skeptical about this move up in competition. And so far, Mizzou being in the SEC has beat up on these teams, but they have a much tougher matchups ahead. They're going to be going against Bama. They're going against Texas A&M, Oklahoma, some other SEC teams. South Carolina is their first hard test this week. I'm excited to see what's in store there. So I think he's still a good player, but a tier down from the high end for Ahmad Hardy.
I think that's definitely fair, but
Yeah.
at the same time, I think I'm not really taking anything back because I feel like if he continues like he has been, he will move into that tier one. If he completely falls off, which it seems like you're trying to predict here, then obviously he's going to fall into that tier
What?
three. So
Why would we not predict this? He's playing just extremely tough competition ahead. The two games that are propping up his production, that's definitely going to get outweighed here in a matter of a
sure,
couple of weeks. So
We could say the same
I'm
thing
just
about
trying to
Justice
project.
Haynes.
yeah, and
Yeah, he
that's the
played
problem. We can
Oklahoma.
basically say that about any player right now.
Because
Yeah,
Justice
yeah, but
Haynes
Justice
kind of
Haynes.
plotted against Oklahoma as well if it wasn't for that 75-yard carry like I was talking
Oh,
about.
well, we,
Like,
we can't take out every guy's 75-yard carry now, can we?
all right,
6.6
well,
yards per carry for 125 yards against Oklahoma, who's a very stout team this year. I I don't know. I think that there's a little bit more there as far as what Justice Haynes did against a tough competitor and a little bit more stiff competition in Oklahoma. I am ready to, yo-yo back and forth on these guys, I guess, because I mean I'm not gonna write off Ahmad Hardy necessarily, right? I still like him as a high-end guy, but I want to pull back the reins a little bit here. It'll be fun to see if he can keep this up because I'll be eating some big-time crow, right? If he maintains this level of
which
efficiency in production.
I never expected to be like the Ahmad Hardy defense attorney here, but and I think you're right because the Kansas game end up being a microcosm for the entire season. We just have to wait and see. But I'm just not going to discount what we saw last weekend with UL Lafayette. And I know, yes, they're like a Sun Belt team or whatever, but it's still Division One opponent, and he ripped him for 250 yards with almost a 20% big time run rate. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll see what he does moving forward. It seems like Missouri's comfortable with him handling the ball a lot, so I think that's why I'm going to leave him in tier 2 for now. But I get what you're saying because the Kansas game should give reason for pause.
I feel like Hardy is
Jamal
the
Roberts
first.
is
Okay.
just as good as him this season so far. I mean, Jamal Roberts is just right behind him efficiency wise and a better receiving back already for Missouri as what a second, third year guy, and Marquise Davis, who we had talked about on this podcast as a freshman coming in, who's been actually pretty solid as well in some limited flashes. So I think that's very fair to shout him out for sure. But just some reason for like, if we see a lot of these guys excelling in this backfield, we might expect some slowing down here.
I think he's the first player that we could say could easily go into either or. Like we're putting him in two. He could easily be in one in 3 weeks. He could easily be in three in 3 weeks. And it wouldn't surprise me either way. Just, based on Aaron has definitely convinced me it's not a lock by any means. I'm glad I didn't put him in tier one. But I feel like every other one is like he's really close to this tier. He's really close to that tier. Like I'm not really like swaying that much, but Hardy could easily go in either direction. So that won't blow my mind. Another player, I guess, from consensus or from a lot of people that I've seen on at least Twitter and in the space are not wanting to believe in. But he has to be a riser, and he's going to be this last player that we talk about before we get out of here because we're already running over. But I feel like we would have been remiss if we did not mention Omar Cooper Jr. in the Devy Risers here. Aaron had a post about him, how he was hating the fact that he had like 42 points on his bench or whatever it was. You gotta have faith, brother. You gotta start him. No, actually, I did not start him in a league as well, so it's hard to say, but I think we were all pretty in on Elijah Surratt. There was a lot of hype for Fernando Mendoza coming into the season, so there was a lot of reasons to be excited about this offense and everything. And yet here we are. Omar Cooper Jr. has blown up, doubled Elijah Surratt in yardage. Has 4 touchdowns to his 3. Uh, I'm not necessarily comparing the players. I'm not even saying that I hate Surratt all of a sudden or anything like that. But I think that Cooper has to be a riser for us. I guess the question is now, how far is he rising?
For me, I still think Surratt is the number one receiver on that team. I'm not going to let one game change my mind. Yeah, he had 10 targets, caught all of them for 200 yards. But Surratt, the week before, was targeted 13 times, caught 9 of them for 100 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, and Surratt has proven to be better last season and for the first 2 weeks of this season, prior to what we saw with Omar Cooper last week. I don't want to say he's a flash in the pan because I was on Cooper last year. I think he looked pretty good, just from like a yards per route run standpoint, and he was a guy who Curtis Rourke relied on in some situations to maybe he was targeting him in the red zone, scoring touchdowns later in the season. So I think he's going to be in tier 3 for me because I don't think he's not fool's gold. I think he's always been something. I just don't think he's, especially considering the nature of the wide receivers, yeah, especially in 2027. I just don't think he is a high end prospect. Not that he's a 20. He could theoretically come out this year, I believe. I don't think he will do that, but if he does, I don't think he's gonna be near the top. I think this is one game. It was 200 yards, which is great. I just don't think he's with like those guys that I would consider just below the high end college prospects just yet. So I'm putting him at 3.
I'd have to agree there. 3 seems like a safe spot for Omar Cooper as a tier down from the higher end guys. I am also similarly to Andy contemplating like, is he more of a flash in the pan type of a guy? That's actually the phrase that Andrew Woodruff at Devy Scout on Twitter used. He and I had just a really brief dialogue on that, and Andrew's kind of thinking he is a little bit more of that flash in the pan, where he's went off in the past, but is he going to stack up those games consistently? That's the question here, right? And so Omar Cooper has always been kind of that big play threat. He's going to show up in a model or any sort of for any evaluators who value that explosion, right? That big time play threat. And he is kind of a red zone threat too, which is fun. So can he put together the consistency that they need? Because Elijah Surratt probably will be that number one target. But if Cooper's a close second, but he's more explosive, he's more dynamic, I think that we'll be seeing that shift a little bit. Who is the quote unquote alpha or most valuable receiving option in that wide receiver room? And we might be seeing that here with Cooper. So I think he is a tier down from the high end. There's a chance he is a flash in the pan. I picked him up in one C2C league. I believe enough at least to, try to take a share and get him weekly starting on my bench, or I should say, starting for me instead of sitting on my bench. So, yep, Omar Cooper, a tier down from the high end. It sounds like is the consensus, unless John has veto power or something up his sleeve.
I thought about using my host veto power, but I guess I'm gonna let you guys convince me here. I really wanted to put him into tier 2, but I'm gonna let you guys convince me to keep him in tier 3 for now, just because it was an FCS opponent, and so give me one more game, and and maybe I'll be more willing to really lock down a tier. But what I will say is he's really, I don't even, I don't film grind. I'm not truly comping the players, but just from what I'm seeing and everything, he really reminds me of Jace Brown. And so I'm just really liking what I'm seeing. You know, beyond the obviously we're all talking about the 200 yards receiving he had this game, but in the previous game he didn't have that much receiving wise, but he had one rush for 75 yards and a touchdown. So, you know, like that's where kind of reminding me of Jace Brown there, where, you know, it's not always and I'm not even saying that Mendoza hasn't been good or anything like that, but like it's not always like, oh, you know, is the QB play there, like things like that. But you know, you start seeing other things. They're trying to get him the ball. They're trying to get the ball into his hands, and that's more of a Jace Brown thing. Like we've seen some pretty poor play from Avery Johnson, so it's like they try to get the ball into his hands in other ways and things like that. And so I'm kind of seeing that with Omar Cooper Jr. Now it's only one play, but Aaron, you know, talked about how he's the big play guy. You know, so that's where I'm kind of you know, seeing that correlation there. And the other thing is, you know, we're talking about how Elijah Surratt should be the wide receiver one and all that. Well, Surratt has run 81 routes to Cooper's 71, so he's actually been on the field more. He's targeted less, you know. And it's just like I don't know. It could be one of those things where you have a new QB come in, all of a sudden you have a new favorite target, and next thing you know, you have a guy take over a spot that you didn't really think was going to take over. And I really like Elijah Surratt, so this is not me downplaying him or putting him down at all. Um, but like I said, in a week or two, this could be one of those things where my daughter just turned my lights off again. This could be one of those things where you know, it really could be okay, it was a flash in the pan, or no, like we have a legit star on our hands. He figured it out in his senior season. So I'm willing to go tier three here, but I really want to go higher than that, honestly. But you guys are keeping me grounded here, as is my daughter, as I'm sitting here in the dark. Why don't we get out of here? I'm just gonna stay in the dark. I'm not even gonna turn my lights back on. Why don't we just go ahead and get out of here? I'm not going to ask for words of wisdom or anything like that. All I'm going to say is, hey guys, we really appreciate you guys listening. We appreciate all the views on the shorts and YouTube. Make sure, if you are not already, make sure you are subscribed to the Gridiron Ratings YouTube channel, so you can see all these shorts and you know, and videos that we're putting out. We're gonna probably start doing some fun stuff with that. I have a couple of like contests and things like that in mind that I think we might be doing here shortly. So you're gonna obviously want to make sure that you're subscribed there. Obviously, make sure you are following the podcast here if you are not, or if you're new. And make sure you're reviewing and liking and doing all that kind of stuff. It helps us out a lot. Appreciate DLF, appreciate Gridiron Ratings, but we're gonna go ahead and get out of here. We are cashing out.